Huh?
It's light.
Hare The Supreme Controller, who possesses an eternal form of blissful knowledge, whose glistening earrings swing to and fro, who manifested himself in Gokula, who stole the butter that the gopis kept hanging from the rafters of their storerooms, and who then quickly jumped and ran in retreat in fear of Mother Yashoda, but was ultimately caught. To that Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
On seeing his mother's release, he cried and rubbed his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes were fearful and his breathing quick, and as Mother Yashoda bound his belly with ropes, he shivered in fright and his pearl necklace shook. To the Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, who is bound with his devotee's love, I offer my humble obeisances.
Those super excellent pastimes of Lord Krishna's baby, the drowning inhabitants of Gokula and pools of ecstasy, to the devotees who are attached to only his majestic aspect of Narayana and Vaikuntha, the Lord herein reveals, I am conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion. Tis the Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, my obeisances hundreds and hundreds of times.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for liberation, nor for eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor for any other boon. My only prayer is that your childhood pastimes may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your creatures, Paramatma. I simply wish that your childhood pastimes may ever be enacted in my heart.
O Lord, the cheeks of your blackish lotus face, which are encircled by locks of curling hair, can better have benefit which mother shows kisses. When more can I describe than this? Millions of opulences are introduced to me, and when this vision constantly in my mind.
O limited Vishnu, O Master, O Lord, be pleased upon me. I am drowning in an ocean of sorrow, and I'm almost like a dead man. Please shower the rain of mercy on me. Uplift me and protect me with your nectarine vision.
O Lord Damodar, in your form as a baby, Mother Yashoda bound me to a grinding stone to grow fertile cows. You then freed the sons of Kubra, Manigriva, and Nalapura, who were cursed to stand as trees, and you gave them the chance to become your devotees. Please bless me in the same way. I have no desire for liberation into your effulgence.
O Lord, the entire universe was created by Lord Brahma, who was born from your abdomen, which was bound by a rope out of Yeshua. This rope I have on a low basis. I have basis to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and to your unlimited pastimes. Shri Shri Radhamadar Ki. Jai. Jai Vishnu Bhagavan Sabhava Shri Shri HareKrishnaKC Prabhupada Ki. Jai Vishnu Bhagavan Sabhava Shri Shri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Gopi Vaishnava Govinda Ki. Amacharya Sri Haridasa Thakur Ki. Rimse Go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vedikadava Shri Sadguru Bhaktivinoda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shakti Shri Gopinath Ki. Damodar Ki. Turdam Ki. Navigam Ki. Janapurdam Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulasi Devi Ki. Munamaya Ki. Rangamaya Ki. Samadeva Bhaktivinoda Ki. All glories to the single devotees. All glories to the single devotees. All glories to the single devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
You might be over there.
Sadvaitam Sadvatam Tarijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganam Shri Vishakam Vipascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpade Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda
I'm gonna exit
Hare
out real quick.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
I wanna.
Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare
Okay, hold
Rama,
on.
Rama Rama, Hare
So that my battery
Hare.
doesn't die. A little bit.
Everybody, can you hear?
Right.
Let's read from Chapter 13, that's what I flipped to. Which text? 13, hopefully. Well, I was close. Okay, we'll read the Sanskrit and translations together. Then we'll go back and discuss text 6 and 7 of chapter 13. Mahabhutanya hankaro buddhiravyaktam evacha indriyani rashaikam cha panchachendriya gocharaha ijhadvesha sukham dukham sanghatas chetanadrihi etakshitram samasena savikaram udharitam
The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, the mind, the five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Text 8 through 12. Amanvitvam adambhitvam ahimsak shantir arjavam acharyopasanam shaucham stairyam atma vinigraha indriyarteshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadi dukadoshanudarshanam asaktir anidhibishvanga putratara griharishu nityam cha samaschittatvam ishtanishtopapatishthu Mai chanayanya yogena bhaktir avya vicharini viviktadesha sevitam arathir jana samsari adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnanart darshanam itaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad atonita. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of the false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, non-attachment to children, wife, home, and the rest, and even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, resorting to solitary places, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I thus declare to be knowledge, and what is contrary to these is ignorance. It's a long purport, so we have to flip a few pages. Text 13. Kayam yathat pratakshyami yasgyatva mritam ashnute anadimat param brahma nasathanas uchite. I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal, this is beginningless, and it is subordinate to me. It is called Brahman, the spirit, and it lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. Text 14. Sarvata pani padam tat sarvatokshik shiromukam sarvata shruti maloke sarvam avritya tishtati. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes and faces, and he hears everything. In this way the supersoul exists. Text 15. Sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya vivarjitam asaksham sarva brichaiva nirgunam guna bhoktricha. The supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he is the master of all modes of material nature. In text 16. Bahir antas shabhutanam acharam charam evacha sukshmatvatad avigeyam durastham chantikejatat. The supreme truth exists both internally and externally, in the moving and non-moving. He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. So we'll go back to text 6 and 7. Read the translation and purport. We'll see what we'll do. Okay. The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, the mind, the five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Report. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the five great elements, or Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. Then 5 working senses: voice, legs, hand, the anus, and the genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, warmth, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there is desire, hatred, pleasure, and pain, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms represented by consciousness and conviction are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the subtle false ego. They are a representation in the material conception. Consciousness is represented by intelligence, of which the unmanifested stage is the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested 3 modes of material nature is called pradhana. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail along with their interaction should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and they are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then begins to decay, and at the last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetragya, the knower of the field, its proprietor, it's different. And such a perfect purport by Srila Prabhupada, going through all these different things that Krishna listed, fully breaks them down in such a easy to understand way. But due to our, at least my dim-witted Kali Yuga intelligence, then we should have to go through each part that he listed and break it down and talk about it much more just to get it. But it's all right there. So Krishna in this chapter is talking about Kshetra and Kshetragya. Kshetra means field. Kshetragya, knower of the field. So Krishna is describing the field of all the activities and the person who knows that field, who's acting within that field. So then Prabhupada describes these 24 elements, which is the field of activity. And then he describes the more subtle aspects, such as desire, hatred, happiness, distress, and ultimately convictions. These are what propels the Kshetragya, the knower of the field within the field of activities, to interact with the field. And different philosophies are akin to seeing that this field of this material world is inherently that of turmoil and suffering and distress. So they try to cut it out. And what are they really trying to cut out? They're trying to cut out this interaction with the field. You cut out desire, you cut out hatred and happiness, duality, distress. You cut all these things out, and then you'll be left with nothing, which is happiness. This is some sects of spirituality or meditation, you could say, practice. So Krishna, thankfully, he's not saying this in the Bhagavad Gita. He's very much so encouraging Arjuna the whole time. We have to think in context of the Bhagavad Gita. It's Arjuna on the battlefield, and he doesn't want to do his battle because he's distressed. So he could very much take up that same path of, okay, I'm just not going to fight, and I'm just going to cut out all these things, and then I'll be happy because maybe my distress will be gone. But Krishna is urging him to act, Krishna consciousness, to do his duty within this field of activities, but do it for Krishna on his behalf. In this way, we can act in the world but not acquire sin, the reactions that comes with it. Like Krishna says, just like a lotus sitting on top of the water. You ever seen a lotus? Is anybody? You? Mridanga has. I've never seen. But they sit on the water. You can look up a picture, at least online. It has like a latexy plastic covering. Like that. That's what the plant is made out of. So water hits it and it rolls right off. It's untouched. That way we can act in the world, and from somebody with no knowledge, they could see the devotee doing daily activities like everybody else does. Cutting the grass, picking flowers, brushing their teeth, shopping. But the difference is the consciousness. They're not doing it for their own sense gratification, for their own pleasure. They're doing it for the Lord, for some shape and form connected to the Lord. And in this way, the Lord absolves the devotee of this karmic reactions of the material world. Otherwise, the more and more and more we try to mitigate life's sufferings by making plans and adjustments, more we're implicated into karma. It's like being stuck in a spider web or quicksand. You get caught a little bit, and the more you try to struggle and twist and shake to get out, the more you get entangled. So karma, we can't escape on our own. It's very, very difficult. But simply, if we surrender to Krishna, very easily we can cross over this modes of material nature, which is this backdrop of the material world. So I'd like to read more and discuss more, unless anybody has any questions or comments at any time. That's also welcome. This next series of verses is very nice. It's like Srila Prabhupada's spiritual dictionary. It goes through many words that we're used to, but gives it a definition proper in Krishna consciousness. So let's hear some of them. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control. Renunciation of the objects of sense gratification. Absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. Non-attachment to children, wife, home, and the rest. And even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me. Resorting to a solitary place. Detachment from the general mass of people. Accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I thus declare to be knowledge, and what is contrary to these is ignorance. So Krishna is describing the field, the knower of the field, how one interacts with the field, and then what is knowledge, what is to be sought within that field. And contrary to this, what is to be avoided, which Krishna, he describes a little bit more in depth in chapter 16, where he describes the divine and demoniac qualities. So, this is a very long purport. I don't think I'll read the whole thing, but I want to go through some of these words that Krishna mentions in Prabhupada's purport. So just one thing I want to point out, that the very first thing that Krishna says is amanitvam, humility. So why is this significant? Because all of these, Krishna is saying this is knowledge. So the first step into acquiring knowledge, the foundation is humility. There's no humility, very, very difficult to acquire knowledge. And we could see this just going to ordinary school. You have to be there and hear from a teacher. You have to receive a textbook. You have to read the book. You have to do the work. You have to apply yourself to the process. It takes some level of humility, of submitting yourself before whoever's giving you the knowledge. So the devotee by cultivating this humility, sees the greatness of the Lord in all facets of life and realizes that we, on our own, don't have so much of this knowledge, which Krishna says. So that's a good impetus to be more humble and really be open to what Krishna is giving. So I'm going to go to the second paragraph here, where Prabhupada's beginning to talk about some of these words. He says, as for the knowledge outlined here, these items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. It's such a simple yet sublime definition of humility, because this is actually one of the strongest binding forces for us to remain in the material world. And it's said that we can give up all the anarthas, envy, greed, lust, but this desire to be acknowledged from others, for me to do some activity and others to see how great I am, this is like the root of all the other anarthas. So you can get rid of all of the bad things within our consciousness, but from this one desire to be acknowledged for our greatness, then all the other anarthas can come back from that. So it's very important to cultivate humility. Let's see what else Prabhupada says about it. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. Yeah. Hey, what were you going to say? Come on. You had something. So if it's a small point, you could say it. Well, yeah, it's the same thing. We could enter into ISKCON, which is strongly promoting following these religious principles, but still we may take it really loose or not be serious, and then we become accustomed to posing in a certain way, and it's not good for anybody. So I really like your point. That's a really nice realization. And Prabhupada, on the last sentence, it's very nice. He said, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. We can judge by these items. So from time to time, we can analyze our consciousness and where it's at, but we have to be very honest with where we're at, because it's easy to talk about, we're not the body every day and give up your attachment to this and that, but to really be honest with where we're at, because all these here are a guideline. Are we practicing cultivating humility, giving up pride, approaching a bona fide spiritual master? I mean, we could approach one time, but is that approach perpetual? That we're constantly submitting ourselves before the lotus feet of the spiritual master? Cleanliness, external and internal, all these things we can really gauge and see where our consciousness is at. And if we've been quote unquote practicing for some time and we're not developing these, then we could see we're in ignorance. And this is just the sheer reality of what Krishna is saying. So we have to take heed of that. Shri Gauranatai Ki Jai. Okay, I'm going to skip over this nonviolence one. We'll read this one on tolerance. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. What's that famous sentence in that 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, the Krishna book? A man's greatness is estimated by his ability to tolerate provoking situations. Does anybody know, in connection with what pastime Srila Prabhupada wrote this about? He was the brother of Lord Shiva, one of the sons of Brahma. What was his name? Bhrigu Muni? He was gathered with some sages and they were investigating into who is the Supreme Lord, who is the highest person. You know, from India, so many people worship so many different gods. So Bhrigu Muni, very great, son of Brahma, he was analyzing who is the topmost, who is the highest. So you know what he did? He went to Brahma and he was going to offend him. That was his intention. Be rude. So when he got there, it's his father. And he didn't offer his obeisances. He didn't, give any sign of respect, any praise with his words or body, mind. So Brahma was very upset. Imagine your kid, you take care of them your whole life, you give them everything. They come back and just disrespect you. But this is Brahma, a much more cultured person than us, so we can't even imagine. So then he saw Brahma got upset. So then he wanted to see what Lord Shiva would do, who's his brother. So when he saw Lord Shiva, what did he do? He began to rebuke him and chastise him. How filthy you are. You have ashes all over you. You're such a maniac. You walk around with snakes and, no clothes, only a little animal skin. You're so degraded. Lord Shiva became furious. He wanted to teach him a lesson. Became angry. So then he went to Lord Vishnu, who was lying down with the company of Lakshmi. And what did he do upon seeing Vishnu? He kicked him in the chest. Imagine, you approach somebody, even if it's your friend, or laying down, like relaxing, like Dr. David now, and I come up and just kick him real good. It's not so enjoyable. It's not so friendly. But what did Lord Vishnu say? Oh, my poor Bhrigu, your foot, it must be hurting. Please come, let me give you a massage. Let me make sure you're okay. So this is how he tested that Lord Vishnu is actually the supreme, because Lord Vishnu has the utmost ability to tolerate, that he is not affected by anything in the material world. So this pastime is there to show us that. So tolerance, what else can we do in life? We have to tolerate. And when we become more and more frustrated with tolerance, it's stemming from a position of us wanting to be the controller. Because I'm in this situation, I don't like it. I wish it was like this. I want to make it like that. I have an idea, it should be done like this, and this person has this idea, it should be done like that. We become frustrated. But, just imagine like a little ant who's on the ground, roaming around. I'm just thinking from my perspective, I see him, I'm like, oh, it's so easy for him to tolerate because, he has no say in the world, he has no independence. But that same ant is dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with. Struggle with this, we can't tolerate this, we get frustrated with that. So all the way from Brahma down to the ant, we're all dealing with karma and the reactions to our past deeds stuck within this material world. So we have to learn to tolerate. There's no other choice because we're not the supreme controller. And the more we resist that, the more it breeds anxiety, frustration, disappointment, unsteadiness. So very fortunate to have an opportunity to do that every single day. And when one actually is eager to do that, it's like opening up a whole nother dimension of looking at it rather than like going against the grain. So practice. Okay, let's read the next one. Simplicity. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. Without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth to an enemy. And this reminds me actually of Jayadvaita Maharaj. One time I was with one of my godbrothers and he wanted to approach him with the intention to get Maharaj to give like a brahmachari class, brahmachari sangha. And he approached him and I remember Jayadvaita Maharaj was like, why only talk to brahmacharis? That means, I have to tell half the room that they're not welcome. And, from the brahmachari's perspective, it's like, oh, but maybe there's a different mood, a different like nectar that we could hear or inquire from, in that kind of situation. But what I observed from him, over the coming months, year, is that he speaks in such a way that he could speak to anybody straightforward and palatable about any part of the philosophy. So what I'm trying to say is I think he really embodies this simplicity, that he's speaking without diplomacy. It's not that he has a secret intention or agenda. He speaks what's there straightforward as it is, but presented in a palatable and easy to understand way. So we should also strive to be simple in speaking the philosophy, but also simplicity is a very deep thing. What's coming to my mind is that Gaur Govinda Swami, he would often mention this point that, there's, how do you say, there's two people that are self-realized, you could say, or who excel. One is somebody who's, well, let me reframe it in this way, that if one is simple, then the spiritual path is very easy because you just simply follow what's there and simply surrender and simply depend upon Krishna and Guru and just, that's one-pointed, just simplicity. This is my life and that's it, and I'm happy with that. But the more complex we are, the more different ideas, the more, junk we have, the more baggage we carry, the less simple we are. So then the more we have to be convinced with transcendental knowledge. So he's making the point that there's two people and one's on one end of the spectrum and one's on the other end of the spectrum. And they're both enlightened, you could say, with spiritual bliss. But those who aren't super advanced and super, already enlightened and transcendental, and those who aren't simple in their heart and simple in their mind and simple in their dealings, then everybody in the middle is very complex. And those complexities, we have to cultivate spiritual knowledge. We have to study the scriptures. We have to practice. We have to tolerate. because we carry all these complexities within our consciousness, and over time this will become purified, and you'll see those both ends of the spectrum can actually be the same in one sense, simple, but still spiritually sharp and refined. So yeah, continuing. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services, so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advance without the disciples following the regulated principles. Or the regulated principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So Prabhupada's giving us like the cheat code of spiritual life, the shortcut by approaching the spiritual master and sincerely trying to serve him and receive his blessings. Those blessings go a long way in blessing us, even if we're not able to follow the regulated principles, and blessing us also so we're able to follow all these regulated principles. Immediately when we become short in our dealings with the spiritual master or commit offenses to Vaishnavas, then material desires fester within our heart. So we should always try to render the nicest service we can in a sincere and humble attitude, especially towards the spiritual master, but to all Vaishnavas, because all Vaishnavas are representatives of the Lord. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna and always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. So this is very important, this external cleanliness and internal cleanliness. In one sense, one could say external cleanliness, what's the point? We could become transcendental and see we're not the body. But because we're so conditioned to the body's activities, then I was hearing Dr. Joseph explain to Dr. Aiden, I believe the other day very nicely, about we have to work from the gross down to the subtle things. So all this was in the class we were giving the other day. Everything manifests from subtle to gross. We can see in the Srimad Bhagavatam of how the material world's created. It starts from sound and ether and progresses on to more and more gross manifestations of the material world. And just with our life in general, everybody has many examples of this, but we have a thought, we have an idea, some kind of thing, and that subtle idea or thought will manifest to some desire, some conviction, and then it will manifest to, an activity or relationship or manifestation of some item we're trying to acquire. So that subtle builds to the gross. So we have to work the opposite way down and see how the gross actually will affect the subtle also. So if we're conditioned to the world around us, like Krishna says, we're helplessly being driven by the modes of material nature. Then to change our environment in a way that's more conducive for us to come to sattva gun, more clarity of mind. So external cleanliness is very important. So we should all start our day. If you're not already, you should wake up and take a shower right away, bath. This will clean your mind, your consciousness, your body. And then make sure we do whatever else is necessary to keep the body fit and clean, and then jump into more important, this internal cleanliness. And Prabhupada gives the example of always chanting Hare Krishna. So not just go to the temple and pick up our beads for the japa time, and chant, or only on Sunday chant, which is good, but it's a start. Always chant Hare Krishna, because if we're not chanting, there's so much disturbances, so much anxiety, so much pressure going on in the mind. But Krishna is the supreme controller. If we depend upon Krishna, Krishna can take care of everything. He can organize everything. But we're not trusting Krishna. We think, oh no, but I have to do this. I have to focus on this. I have to change this. Stress, anxieties, worries. So to always chant Hare Krishna will give so many realizations that you could never even imagine. Not like I want to say, not just like transcendental realizations that Krishna is there in the holy name, but realizations that like, oh wow, this is actually difficult because I'm attached to thinking about this, I'm attached to thinking about that. So very, very revealing. So we got a few minutes. Does anybody want to say, yeah?
I was looking at text 13, and it said that I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. This is beginningless, and it is subordinate to me. It is called Brahman, the spirit, and it lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So my question is, because in the next verse it says, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes and faces, and he hears everything. In this way, the super soul exists. So my question is, why is Krishna calling the super soul Brahman when really he's Para Brahman? And why is he referring to the super soul? Like, why is he referring to the super soul instead of the individual soul when he's talking about Brahman?
Well, let's see what Prabhupada says in these first few sentences. I think he talks about it. It said, the Lord has explained the field of activities and the knower of the field. So the Lord described Chaitra and Chaitrikya. He has also explained the process of knowing the knower of the field of activities. So those were the first two series of verses we just read. Now he is explaining the knowable, both the soul and the super soul respectively. So by knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the super soul, one can relish the nectar of life. So not just knowing the soul, oneself, but knowing the super soul who's also situated with the self and seeing them together simultaneously, but also seeing their difference, their distinction. So just in a series of verses of what Krishna is saying, like I mentioned, he described Chaitra, Chaitrikya, how the field of activities works, what's actually knowledge and ignorance within that field, what should be sought. And then he's explaining what's beyond, like the underlying principle of the Supreme Lord being there in the feature of Paramatma or Brahman. So is that more clear? Or, I mean, Brahman, Brahma is a word that is often misunderstood, but when we hear it in context of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks it in a deliberate way. It's usually referring to like the soul, the spirit. So then Prabhupada's making the connection, like not just the self, but the super self also is to be known. So I could look and do more research, but I know there's another place where Krishna mentions these words, and it's more distinctively of how he describes it. I forget which chapter, but Krishna, he asks all these questions, and in the beginning of the next chapter, Krishna, he describes all these words and gives more of a description. So I have to find that another time. Yeah, you have something? The last two or the next two?
Hare Krishna, could you read the last few sentences of text 13?
it answers this question. The description of Brahman mentioned in this verse is in relation to the individual soul. And when the word Brahman is applied to the living entity, it is understood that he is Vijnanam Brahma, as opposed to Ananta Brahma. Ananta Brahma is the Supreme Brahman, personality of Godhead. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, but in a more concise and technical way. So what is it? Vijnanam Brahma and Ananta Brahma. The unlimited Brahma and Vijnanam, the knower, because that's the context here. There's the Chaitra and Chaitrikya, the field and the knower of the field. So one who is there acting and realizing and seeing it, and then Ananta Brahma, who is unlimited, who is all pervading within that. So, thank you everybody for hearing. We can conclude here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gauranatai ki jai. Vansha kapatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhye vacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.